5-second penalty.
5-second penalty.
A 10-second time penalty for Max Verstappen.
Overtaking is stupid. You get two, maybe three extremely hot-headed men, all desperate to be ahead of the other. Tell them they can fire out on a piece of tarmac in overpriced go-karts, but make sure you give them a strict set of rules to follow. Then have more holes in those rules than Swiss cheese, and expect them not to fight over said holes.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
Alright, that got a little bit complicated, but the fact of the matter is, Formula One's overtaking system is completely broken. And we need to try and fix it. Back in the good old days of Formula One, there was pretty much no rules. Aside from don't have a suspicious salmon in your car and try not to shoot your opponent, in the 1950s and 60s, Formula One overtaking was more about trying to keep yourself alive than anything else. Plus, in those days, the only thing dictating track limits were hay bales and literally houses. Moving forward from there, though, tracks would become a little bit safer. You'd start to get things called curbs and runoff, where drivers had a little bit of extra room to run wide in those dangerous corners. You know, just to prevent Formula One cars from ending up in someone's living room. With that, though, it presented its own sort of problem. You see, now you've got areas of the track that aren't actually areas of the track. The drivers whose brains hadn't been damaged in a fatal crash realized that you could probably abuse these track limits. So the idea of leaving the track and gaining an advantage first sort of started out. And of course, you would get penalized actually quite heavily if you corner cut at any corner. Still though, the white line was not the definitive track limit for a very long time in Formula One. In fact, that only became a thing very recently, and we'll explain why in a minute. That's why when you go look at pretty much any old clip, you can always spot the Drive to Survive fans who started watching about 1 year ago, because they will go, how was this fair? He clearly went over the track limits. That was actually the rules back then. Anyway though, as Formula One went on and people still continued to die, we decided we might need some more safety standards. So tracks and runoff got even bigger, and there was less gravel and grass, which caused funny crashes, and more tarmac, which caused, okay, well, still some funny crashes. Combined with this massive runoff, though, we also got massive cars. Seriously, did they give the F1 cars an American diet for part of the off-season? Probably, you fat fuck. Alright, I'm very sorry because England is just as bad with our terrible food. But the bigger cars were more to do with safety and accommodating the electrical engines than the Americanization of Formula One. Also, during this time, we decided the introduction of every single street circuit possible was a good idea, to the point where now we race on more streets than tracks. That is actually a joke. We surprisingly don't yet. Although I'm sure if Stefano Dominicali has his way, and his way is just filling his pockets,
I like money,
we would definitely have a hell of a lot more street circuits. But then we started to notice a bit of a problem, because the overtaking rules were just straight up not working.
Magnussen, that's what I see from Magnussen and never saw in my life.
Like, you just had cars pushing it wider and wider, to the point where in some races they weren't even using the track anymore. They were just kind of making their own track up and going way past what we would now call the limits of the track. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was nothing like that one IndyCar race at COTA. To be honest, that was just absolutely hilarious, and I would love to see IndyCar drivers on different tracks just going absolutely up to the wall, because track limits just straight up isn't a thing in IndyCar. But this led to, obviously, Formula One teams complaining all of the time, and then because the Formula One teams are complaining, all of the fans who have nothing to do and live on the cesspit that is F1 Twitter decided that they needed to complain on behalf of the fans, and then because social media admins somehow value Twitter opinions over like every other opinion ever, they decided they actually needed to change the rules. And come on guys, if we've learned anything from Rainbow Six Siege, it's that you don't listen to the people who competitively take part in your game.
I'm diamond one.
When making decisions about your game, because what they want is usually... And if you don't play Rainbow Six Siege, you have no idea what that reference was. But basically what I'm saying is the players of your game want something to benefit them that might not necessarily benefit everyone in the long term and the audience. So as I'm about to delve into what the FIA proposed as the solution to the track limits problem, let me first quickly ask you one thing. Would you mind supporting the channel?
No.
If you've got a bit of spare income, I ask you to just hear me out for like 2 seconds. V12 RS is a company that ships authentic Formula One merch to everywhere across the globe. They work with official Formula One partners, and the quality of these hats and stuff is really high. I mean, when this got shipped to me, I was just so impressed because there are so many dodgy, unofficial, unlicensed F1 products out there. To have an actual official company working with me is pretty cool. So if you do have a bit of spare cash, you're looking to get some F1 merch, 10% of everything you buy from the link in the description will go to supporting the channel, and I'll massively appreciate it. Anyway, back to talking about the white line. No, I'm not talking about a queue for some unseasoned chicken. The white line is what's been added to Formula One to try and prevent this problem with track limits. And there was also a complete overhaul of the overtaking rules. So now you need to have at least 2 tires within the track at any time. And if you're completely off the track, that's it, over for you. No. People obviously still run wide all the time. You can probably think of a few tracks where people often go over the track limits. Austria last year, before the gravel traps got added at turn 9 and 10, Perez went off there like 4 times in Q3, got every lap deleted. It was absolutely hilarious. But now there's actually a punishment for it. And at first, everything seemed okay. It made sense to actually start enforcing the track limits rather than arbitrarily trying to decide what was and what wasn't unfair. But it's where the overtaking comes in that things start to be a bit weird. There's this whole thing about if you're ahead at the apex, the corner is yours.
There is no your half of the corner. There is only my all of it. Do you understand?
So if you're trying to go round the outside, but the person who's in front of you is ahead of you at the apex, they basically have the right to push you off the track, and you should back out and go behind them. But there sort of comes into question, what is the apex? Different drivers are always taking different lines, and if you're attacking and defending, sometimes you're changing where the apex actually is, and you can manipulate that to always stay ahead. So then you get incidents like turn 12 at Cota, where Verstappen is ahead at the apex, barely stayed in the track limits himself, if not was actually a little bit off it. Lando just went round because the runoff is there to use. And at that point, it felt more like the FIA was flipping the coin on which overtakes were and weren't legal every single time. Like when George Russell did it, it was a 5-second penalty to George Russell. But when Verstappen does it and Norris goes round, it's a penalty to Norris for staying off. Now, to be completely honest, before you expect me to give my opinion and go, he should have got a penalty, this should have been this, I genuinely don't know. Both of the incidents were really hard to come up with an answer for, and I think that shows the gray area in the rules that needs clearing up. Like, some of the solutions are to just straight up get rid of the runoff areas, so you can't keep your foot in it. Drivers are a little bit more hesitant to run wide. It just makes everyone that bit more cautious, just like happened in those turns at Austria after Perez kept going wide. Then there's also the option to just widen tracks in general, because overtaking is becoming so difficult within those white lines, especially in street circuits where overtakes barely happen because no one has any runoff to work with, and that's something they sort of need. Now, Cota, apart from that turn 12, I think it's a great example of a track where you can really overtake this year. The track is absolutely massive, probably because it's American, no offense.
Hey dude, I feel so confident speaking like an American.
Me too, can't wait to eat a hot dog.
I actually didn't mean that as a fat joke. That was meant to be a joke about how big your highways and roads are in general. You can take it as a fat joke if you want.
Hot dog.
But having those wider tracks, especially in most of Cota, it's really made for exciting side-by-side racing that we barely get to see on any other tracks in the calendar. Even Spa has like 2 overtaking zones now, and that used to be a track known for side-by-side battles. And then maybe it's just kind of an issue you ignore and you expect some unfair penalties here and there. At the end of the day, no sport has ever perfected its penalty system so well that no one ever has a fallout over it. Like football, rugby, whatever sport you're looking at, there's always controversial decisions in the refereeing and stewarding of the sport. And Formula One's no different. You've got a playing field, you've got cars that are fragile going really fast, you've got drivers on the absolute limit, and sometimes those gray areas will come into play. Maybe it's just something we accept, as we've got to trust the stewards in their judgment. No. I do massively respect that the stewards let you off if you're British and then not if you're British. It's like that Family Guy meme. Just replace the colors with British flag. However, I kind of want to know, what would you do to fix overtaking? It's obviously getting a bit stupid with the whole ahead at the apex. Is there any changes you'd make, or are we just burdened to deal with it? Personally, I think changes on the tracks to make racing easier is the easiest and best solution we can go with, rather than having such tight tracks and people having to make these awkward moves. If you did enjoy this video, please hit the subscribe button, and thank you so much to my channel members as well who do support the channel and make it run. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye!